do what I listen. This show means a lot to Melissa in a very different way of what it means to Teresa. I think, to your point, listen, I think anybody who watches the show can see that Melissa wants to be the top dog, and she has trouble with Teresa constantly winning in the end. And this, I'm gonna tell you, it was the season where Danielle Staub, one of my favorites of all time.
Yes.
It was the season where Danielle Staub, unfortunately, Melissa, like, Teresa told me to pull the hair. What I saw was this excitement of Melissa getting the tea. Like, well, she did what? And I think in Melissa's mind, she was like, oh, baby, it's going down.
What if I told you that one decision, just one, might have quietly ended everything for Maurice and Kimmi? Not with a loud announcement, not with a dramatic send-off, but with something far more unsettling. A silence. Because this isn't just another reality TV shakeup. This feels different. It feels calculated, controlled, almost like a story that was rewritten behind the scenes while everyone else was still watching the old version play out on screen. And it all traces back to one name, Carlos King. The man who built the platform, the man who shaped the narrative, the man who, according to recent whispers and a leaked contract that's been circulating online, may have just pulled the plug on one of the most grounded couples the show had.
I have to work harder to get what we deserve, right? And I was such a huge part of that, along with other producers and everybody else involved too. But I moved to Atlanta to do that show, because I was invested in making it #1.
At first, it sounded like gossip, another rumor thrown into the endless cycle of reality TV drama. But then, details started lining up. Scenes didn't feel the same, moments felt cut short, and suddenly, Maurice and Kimmi weren't at the center anymore. They were fading, quietly.
Left only because I felt the need to start my production company. That was the only reason. It was
Really?
Yeah, a lot of people think it was scandal. People love this. I was fired. It's all
But
these rumors.
so you wasn't fired.
I was never
It
fired.
wasn't the scandal.
It was not a scandal.
It wasn't one of the girls or any of the girls.
No girl ever said Carlos on the show. Like, it was never none of that. But that's the thing, and you know me. Listen, this could be a bad thing or not.
Okay.
I don't feel the need to defend myself publicly.
And here's where it gets uncomfortable. Because the leak didn't just suggest they were leaving, it hinted that they didn't exactly have a choice. But before we get into what really happened behind the scenes, you need to understand why this hit so hard in the first place. Because Maurice and Kimmi weren't just cast members. They were something people don't often find on reality TV anymore. They felt real. From the very beginning, their presence on the show stood out in a way that didn't rely on chaos or constant conflict. While others leaned into heated arguments, explosive confrontations, and dramatic breakdowns, Maurice and Kimmi offered something quieter, but deeper. Their story wasn't perfect, and that's exactly why people connected with it.
Keep it all the way real on this podcast today, because I am pissed. Robin admitting that she hid her story from the world on the show that pays you is a slap in the face to everyone involved, including the audience. And the fact that you have the audacity to go on your podcast to reveal this. We spent this entire half-assed season with these made-up storylines about Chris Bassett. And yes, I'm gonna say made up, because I allegedly was told that a few of the housewives had a meeting before filming about what the storyline was going to be, and that this Chris Bassett stuff was part of that conversation. I've always said there was something off about this season, and now I know what it is. None of y'all are living.
Maurice came into the spotlight with a past that wasn't easy to ignore. Legal issues, complicated relationships, a history that followed him into every room he walked into. But instead of hiding from it, he faced it head on. You could see the effort. You could feel the struggle. He wasn't trying to pretend he had it all together. He was trying to figure it out in real time. And then there was Kimmi. Strong without being loud, calm without being passive. She carried herself in a way that didn't demand attention, but somehow always held it.
This reminded me that you can't focus on the noise of the outside world. And unfortunately, a lot of people do. A lot of people focus on the noise, and a lot of people enter the dark space of the noise to benefit them. And when you are a person who lives your life with good grace, good intentions, and a good heart, no person, place, or thing can infiltrate your life.
She wasn't chasing moments, she was living them. And when she opened up about her health battle, everything shifted. That wasn't reality TV anymore. That was life in its most raw and vulnerable form. Watching her go through treatments while still showing up for her family, still standing beside Maurice, still trying to maintain some sense of normalcy, it hit differently. It wasn't scripted, it wasn't exaggerated, it was real. And for a while, that authenticity worked. Fans connected, they rooted for them, they saw pieces of their own lives reflected in their story. But here's the part no one really talks about. Reality TV doesn't always reward real. It rewards reaction. It rewards tension. It rewards moments that keep people talking, even if those moments come at a cost. At first, production leaned into Maurice and Kimmi's journey, the growth, the healing, the honesty. But slowly, something began to change. You could feel it before you could explain it. Scenes started feeling different. Conversations felt guided, like there was an invisible hand shaping where things were going. And that's when the pressure started building. Because being part of a show like this isn't just about living your life, it's about performing it. There are expectations, unspoken rules, and sometimes very direct instructions. If there isn't enough drama, it gets created. If there isn't enough conflict, it gets encouraged. And if you don't play along, that's when things start to shift. Maurice and Kimmi weren't the type to manufacture problems just for the sake of screen time. They had already lived through enough real-life challenges. The last thing they wanted was to turn their relationship into entertainment built on forced tension. But according to the leaked contract, that might have been exactly what was expected of them. And this is where everything changes. Because this wasn't just about filming schedules or payment details. This was about control. The kind of control most viewers never think about. Clauses that reportedly outlined how much participation was required, expectations around engagement in storylines, requirements that hinted at involvement in conflict-driven scenes. And then came the part that really caught people off guard. Terms suggesting that cast members who didn't deliver enough content could have their screen time reduced or be removed entirely. Let that sink in. Not because they weren't authentic, not because they weren't real, but because they weren't dramatic enough. And suddenly, everything started to make sense. Fans had already noticed the changes. Maurice and Kimmi weren't as present. Their scenes felt shorter. Their storylines felt incomplete, like chapters were missing. At first, people blamed editing. But now, it felt like something else. A slow removal, a quiet exit. And when Carlos King addressed the situation publicly, without fully shutting down the rumors, it only made things more confusing. Because instead of clarity, there were more questions. Why would a couple that brought depth to the show be pushed aside? Why would their presence shrink when their story still had so much left to tell? And more importantly, what happened when the cameras weren't rolling? According to insider whispers, things reached a turning point when Kimmi began setting boundaries. After everything she had been through, she wasn't willing to relive painful moments just to create emotional scenes for television. She didn't want to be pushed into situations that didn't feel genuine. And honestly, who could blame her? But here's the twist. In the world of reality TV, boundaries can look like resistance. And resistance, that can be a problem. Maurice, on the other hand, reportedly started pushing back against how his story was being shaped. There were murmurs that he didn't agree with certain narratives being pushed onto him, that he felt like he was being placed into a version of himself that no longer reflected who he was becoming. And when both people in a couple start stepping back, production notices quickly. That's when the shift becomes intentional. Less screen time, fewer scenes, more focus on cast members who are willing to lean into the drama. And just like that, you're no longer the focus, you're background. Fans began picking up on it almost immediately. Something felt off. The chemistry between Maurice and Kimmi was still there, but it was buried under awkward cuts and shortened moments. Important conversations felt rushed. Emotional scenes felt incomplete. It didn't feel natural anymore. It felt managed. And then came the rumors. Talk of disagreements behind the scenes, claims that they were becoming difficult. But here's the truth that often gets overlooked. Setting boundaries isn't being difficult. Protecting your peace isn't being uncooperative. But in a system built on emotional exposure, it can be seen that way. And once that label sticks, it changes everything. Producers start pulling back, storylines get reassigned, and before you even realize it, you're being written out. Not with a big goodbye, not with a dramatic farewell, but quietly, strategically, almost invisibly. And that's exactly what many believe happened here. The leaked contract didn't just expose rules, it exposed a reality most viewers never consider, that the people on screen don't always control their own stories, and when they try to, there can be consequences. For Maurice and Kimmi, those consequences may have come in the form of reduced visibility, shrinking storylines, and eventually an exit that didn't feel like a choice. And emotionally, that kind of shift doesn't just stay on set. It follows you home. It affects how you communicate, how you trust, how you show up for each other. For Kimmi, after everything she had faced, the idea of being pushed into emotional performances must have felt exhausting. For Maurice, trying to grow while being pulled back into old narratives couldn't have been easy. And together, that weight builds, slowly, quietly, until something has to give. Maybe it wasn't a huge argument. Maybe it wasn't a dramatic breakdown. Maybe it was just a quiet realization that peace matters more, that real life matters more, even if it means walking away from something big. Because at the end of the day, no platform is worth losing yourself. And now, here we are, with fans asking questions, with clips being rewatched and analyzed, with a leaked contract that changed how people see everything. But here's the twist no one expected. This might not be the end, because sometimes being pushed out isn't a loss. Sometimes it's a reset. Maurice and Kimmi built something real, and real doesn't disappear just because the cameras stop rolling. If anything, their story might finally have room to breathe, without pressure, without expectations, without someone else deciding what comes next. And maybe that's the part people don't talk about enough, that walking away or being forced to can sometimes be the best thing that ever happens to you. So now the question isn't just what happened, it's what comes next. Will they return in a different way? Will they tell their story on their own terms? Or will this chapter close quietly, leaving fans wondering what could have been? One thing is certain, this situation pulled back the curtain in a way we don't usually get to see. It reminded us that behind every scene, there's another story, one that doesn't always make it to the screen. And sometimes the most important moments happen when the camera's off. So what do you think? Was this just a business decision? Or did Maurice and Kimmi deserve more control over their own story? Were they protecting their peace? Or were they pushed out for not playing the game? Because at its core, this isn't just about reality TV. It's about control. It's about truth. And it's about what happens when real life refuses to be turned into entertainment. And something tells me this story isn't over yet.